Jiro here for Umbra Games with a review of PlayStation 4 exclusive Bloodborne. Just a heads up, this game is rated M for mature, and this video contains scenes from it with graphic violence, aka gallons and gallons of blood, as well as some disturbing imagery and content. Viewer discretion advised. I've always wanted to say that. Bloodborne was developed by From Software, the makers of Demon's Souls and Dark Souls 1 and 2, and have carried the banner of the ultra-hard action RPG title, this time sort of set with a Lovecraftian Victorian London setting. One question I've been getting frequently while playing this game and talking about it with others is how it compares to Dark Souls. I keep trying to answer that question the best I can, but honestly there's actually enough difference in the way Bloodborne plays in contrast to the Souls games that it feels like a different series. I'll try and explain why. I will try to keep this review pretty spoiler-free, but we are over a year since release, and I do want to show off some of the boss fights and environments from all over the game because I know there'll be some people that watch this that will never venture in due to the game's difficulty. So trading the concept of souls for something more visceral, the game begins with your character being infused with some type of strange blood and christened the Hunter. The Hunter's job is to fight back the swarms of those that were infected by the pale moon coming close to the Earth in a cycle that's been going on for centuries. Now, that's pretty much the plot of the game in a nutshell, but where Bloodborne really shines is in those subtexts, those notes you find, the clues you discover, and the environments that all have the ability to tell their own story. Be careful how deeply you choose to dive into the lore of Bloodborne, though. To me, it's been one of the most intriguingly disturbing stories I've seen to date. I think I even dreamed about it a couple nights, wanting answers to some of the mysteries that lay before us. I'll talk a little more about that at the end of the review. Now, Bloodborne sets up an open world, where doors and gates are locked, and you must find the key or destroy the boss, sometimes even though they're seemingly unrelated to that door, in order to proceed. For those of you not familiar with From Software's formula, you basically have little to no direction on where to go, no quest markers, and no glowing objectives. This type of game really pushes you to perform your own exploration and discover paths forward to new areas, each one usually completed by downing some type of large, difficult boss. You gain blood echoes from killing enemies, which serve as both experience points and currency, and if you die without spinning said echoes, they will be in a bloodstain that you have to get back to from the last checkpoint. Now if you die on your way back to there, they're gone forever, thus the difficulty. Now, one minor inconvenience in Bloodborne is that if the bloodstain is in the path of an enemy, they will pick it up, and you have to defeat them in order to get those blood echoes back. While most of the early game you play in the aforementioned London-type setting, things begin to get a bit more twisted as you venture into a twisted nightmare of forests and abandoned castles. Some of these environments are breathtaking in their graphical quality as well as design and architecture. Honestly, this is one of the best looking games I've seen on PlayStation 4 this far. Now, combat, while similar to the Soul games at a basic level, trades in shields for sidearms and spells for, well, sidearms too. There's no magic in this game. Encounters are much more fast-paced. As if you played a melee character and frequently blocked in the Souls games, you're going to have to get better at the dodge roll here. Enemies are also a lot more agile in this game, with some types even able to dodge roll your attacks. Now, in exchange for the lack of a good blocking mechanic, instead if you counterattack your enemy quickly after being hit, you can regain some of your life. Of course, that leaves each fight a game of risk versus reward, because sometimes you just have to get out of range and use a healing potion, instead of pressing your luck hoping to get more swings in before your opponent finishes you. And there's quite a big change in the healing mechanics, as the potions used to heal, blood vials they're called, you don't replenish when you reach a bonfire, lamp. Instead, enemies drop the blood vials, and by default you can carry 20 on your person, with all the rest being sent freely to your storage unit, replenishing when you venture to the central hub known as the Hunter's Dream, or upon death. You can lock onto enemies and switch quickly between them using the right stick, and you have an attack with your main weapon of two different strengths and styles, using R1 and R2, as well as some throwing items like daggers and molotovs. Now, as far as weapons go, in the base game there are about 15 of what they call trick weapons, each one having two forms that can be changed with the press of a button. For example, I started, and most of the game used, the threaded cane that served as a sort of sword for close quick combat and could be flipped out into a chain whip for more open areas and slightly longer distance fights. This is another uniqueness with Bloodborne in that none of the weapons are really better than the other. You don't get an advanced version of the cane. Instead, your only option is to upgrade weapons up to 10 using blood shards and blood rocks and various other materials. This really allows you to find a weapon that fits your playing style and not have to worry about finding something more powerful and not being able to use it. In addition, there are firearms like a pistol and a blunderbuss, but don't expect to be able to use this to range anything in the game like my common spell slinging desire from Souls. The guns do very little damage and instead are used for riposte, stunning the enemy at just the right moment during their attack and performing a visceral move for pretty much the entirety of their life bar. New weapons are accessed most commonly by finding badges throughout the game world, which allow them to be purchased from the merchant in the Hunter's Dream. Armor, while it does offer some protection, really does little between various pieces of clothing and gear. Now, some will protect you from fire a little more, have a slightly higher poison resistance, but at least with the pieces I found, it didn't really hurt all that much to pull off a combination that I think just looked aesthetically neat as opposed to its utility. Your main defense and health boosts come from your character stats, which works as a nice segue here. I've always felt quite a bit of anxiety when upgrading and building a character in Souls games. I mean, what if you open a chest and find a great weapon that you can't wield because you didn't put enough points into dexterity? What if you're getting nailed by diminishing returns just because you want to make that spell powerful enough to one-shot a certain enemy when you're just really not getting much out of it? In Bloodborne, most of that anxiety is gone. While you do have decisions on whether you want to use weapons based on strength or the skill stat, it doesn't ever really feel like you have to worry about missing out. Now, there are a couple hunter tools that require specific stat thresholds, but again, it was never disabling. Now, while in human form in Dark Souls games, you were able in a lot of boss fights to summon an NPC to help you. You don't shift to hollow or lose humanity in Bloodborne, and many times you'll find a place to summon an NPC at the expense of insight. Insight is gained from killing bosses or using consumable items found all over the place. Insight also allows you to summon other players that happen to be in the same area that you are where you haven't finished the boss. You can even fine-tune who you summon by entering a password that your friend can match, and then you each ring your bell and can be drawn into each other's worlds. Now, sometimes this worked quickly, we'd both just ring a bell and instantly be there, and sometimes there was a delay. It was really kind of hard to figure out what the most efficient way to make that happen was. So, what's the benefit of randomly helping other players? Why, just helping your fellow man, of course. Isn't that enough? No, actually, you also earn souls, I mean blood echoes, which serve as the game's currency as well as experience system. While summoning a friend, you do take a small hit to the blood echoes you gain in compensation, but you're able to kill things a lot faster and a lot more safely. Now, this brings me into the relative difficulty of the game. I finished pretty much every Dark Souls boss, optional or not, solo. Often wasn't in human form when I'd approach bosses or wouldn't talk to NPCs enough to further their story to make them available. But now we come to Bloodborne. There are a couple here that feel nearly impossible without the help of a summoned friend. One thing From Software's games continue to feature is those massive wind-up hits by bosses that change direction at the last second, leaving the briefest of moments for you to dodge, when very clearly sometimes the blade will just go through you, but you were invulnerable at the microsecond that it passed through your body thanks to your dodge. Bosses actually have a pretty great aggro system in this game, with either player able to get the boss's attention to allow openings for the other to attack. And I was conflicted. Some of the greatest experiences I've had with this type of game is that feeling of isolation, the repeated boss attempts, and so on, but wow, would a game like this be really fun with a fully cooperative campaign? If you die while summoned to someone else's game, you don't lose your souls, you're just removed to your world, and if the person that summoned you dies, you're also booted from the world. So if you need to do some blood echo grinding, you can do it actually a little more safely while helping someone else. One interesting piece of the whole cooperative side is that if friendly people are summoned, it also opens the gate for unfriendlies, as there will be a freaky chick ringing a sinister bell that will allow people interested in PvP into your world. And man, if that happens, always try to be ready. There's nothing worse than facing scores of enemies at once just to have a player trying to get the jump on you at the same time. Now, I did have a few slowdown and frame rate problems, but the majority of time it seemed when it was other players were in my world. I've seen several complaints for this game on load times as well, and I'm not sure if it's just the faster hard drive I put in my PS4, or maybe my level of patience, or perhaps I just needed the time to collect myself before trying again that I didn't even really notice. On that note though, one convenience that would have helped is being able to go from lamp to lamp without having to travel to the Hunter's Dream hub in between, which gives double loading screens. But again, just a minor issue. There is a New Game Plus in Bloodborne, up to 8 or 9 rounds again of it I think. So if you want to get the game's multiple endings, you have the opportunity to play through it again, using the same character and having all of your equipment, and you get increased blood echoes and face more challenging enemies. Also, if you need additional content, there are chalice dungeons, where you can gather various chalices in your travels, farm up some ingredients, and open some additional dungeons. The dungeons are set the first time you complete them, but then can be randomized and procedurally generated if you want to try to go through again. These dungeons are useful for farming more blood echoes, have various forms of loot, and a few unique bosses. These can also be done in co-op as well. You can have multiple dungeon rituals open at a time, and each dungeon will give you access to, I think it was like 3 to 5 layers and then a boss. And the final boss of that area will often provide you with the piece you need to get deeper into the dungeon. There is one piece of DLC called The Old Hunters that features some additional areas and a slew of new hunter weapons. I think I'm actually going to look into that one of these days. The final piece I want to reiterate on again is really how disturbing this game can be. It delves deep into a lot of Freudian theories and why you think the name Bloodborne may be related to a virus, or the fact that the hunter that you play is born by infused blood. I think its intent is actually focusing on the fact that we're all born in blood. There are very heavy themes of motherhood, menstruation, and abortion with, okay, just a little bit amount of spoilers here, a different final boss fight and ending that comes by consuming 3 pieces of umbilical cord. Most NPC little side quests and then everyone dying, including children, and it seems like everything comes down to a bloodbath. Just, wow. Now, keep in mind that in true From Software fashion, pieces of the story and the hidden meanings are really there only if you're truly looking. Otherwise, you're just up for the usual jump scares and intimidating boss fights that make these games unique. Overall, I had a blast playing Bloodborne. It's a very well-polished game, it looks great, and it's a ton of fun to play and explore. In conversation with my frequent co-op partner, the Yellow King, we often referred to many of the items and processes in this game as their soul's equivalent, like Estus Flask the Blood Vial, Titanite Shards the Blood Shards, and I think he always called lamps bonfires, but I mean, it's a habit that's hard to break. So while there are a lot of similarities, and I think I'd stand by the statement if you didn't enjoy the Souls games, you probably won't enjoy Bloodborne, don't be fooled into thinking this is just a thoughtless clone of From Software's winning formula. Rated as an action RPG, this game sits at an 87 on my scale, 2 points higher than my Dark Souls 2 review from earlier in the year, so I guess that answers that question. This is Jiro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can also follow on Twitter to see upcoming reviews when they're posted and general gaming conversation.